We're a minute past, so there's our recording. So we're a minute past. We're officially recording. Thank you everyone for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are located and joining us from. Thank you for joining this another Breathe Zero webinar. Today's fireside chat. I'm joined by Rebecca Ramsdale from Vertical Group, and I will allow her to officially introduce herself in a moment. Today's fireside chat is how to actually deliver real net zero projects in the real estate sector. So there's a lot to unpack there, and a lot of different things we can dive into. Rebecca has an incredible background and a tremendous amount of experience, and then a lot of stories, anecdotes, and just know-how. So we're going to learn a lot. Before I bring her in officially, I'm very excited about Vertical Group. I don't want to steal all of her thunder, but I'm going to tee it up this way. Vertical Group actually is walking the talk. And what that means is they've actually calculated their entire carbon footprint going back to their inception of 2012. So they have incredible know-how and to help their clients with these struggles in this space. So with that, welcome, Rebecca. Thank you for joining me today, and say hello, introduce yourself to the crowd.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me call in on this fireside chat. Happy to be here and share some knowledge and hear some questions from you. Yeah, as mentioned, Colin said that I work at Vertical Group. We're sustainability consultants, and we really like to walk the talk by calculating our own carbon footprint and then offsetting that back to its inception in 2012 plus 10%. And then along the way, we're making adjustments based on, occupancy of our different offices and where we're traveling to. So really having that reflection moment around our purchasing policies to reduce our carbon going forward so we don't have to do as much offset moving forward. So always trying to reduce carbon across the board. We're also a B corporation and 1% for the planet. So we hold ourselves to the same rigorous third party certifications that we work on, like we work on LEED buildings and Fitwel and Well, etc. But my role here at Vertical Group, I'm the Senior Director of Projects. So I oversee a diverse portfolio of high performance buildings and also help our clients navigate through ESG and carbon reporting as well. So my background prior to Vertical Group, I've been at Vertical Group about 8 years, and I come from the general contracting industry where I was a project manager and really have insight into how a building is constructed, the different types of materials, working with, handing off from the design to the construction team to make sure we, of course, hit the deadline, hit our project schedule with really high quality and attention to detail. As far as my education background, I went to Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, where I studied natural science and civil engineering and earned my Bachelor of Science. So excited to connect with you all today. I love connecting with the community and mentoring students and participating in various organizations like the US Green Building Council and more. So I hope I don't use too many acronyms today. If you are unfamiliar, please don't be shy to, add a quick question. What is that acronym? I'll be sure to define it as we go. And we welcome questions in the chat. We have some time at the end to answer questions as we go on. So thanks again for the time to introduce myself and back over to you, Colin.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Thank you. And regarding the questions, yes, please feel free to submit questions. We'll get to them. We may get to some during the conversation. We may get to them more at the end. And then also, if for some reason we go a little bit past in order to answer all the questions, we will do that. That way, when we send out the recording later, it'll have all the questions answered. Um, so real quick before I dive in with the first question, which you can see it's what actually moves the needle. It almost sounds like when you're talking about what Vertical did, you guys are experimenting, testing, trying things out on your own so that when you meet with your customers, you're able to advise properly based on all the experience you've learned. I could be wrong, but it sounds like that's what you're doing, and it's really wonderful to hear because it's practical application and that's that knowledge set that you get over over that extended period of time, 14 years now. So, anyway, so with the official kickoff question, what actually moves the needle? I know it's a big, broad topic, but I know you have a lot of stuff to talk about based on our previous conversation. So excited to hear some input.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely want to move the needle. So making a real impact. I really think that going through the ESG, environmental social governance, and carbon reporting process helps companies reflect into what's their biggest carbon emitter. Is it like the variety of different company-owned vehicles? Could you kind of phase those out to be more hybrid or electric? Is your building powered by gas? We want to decarbonize and get that electrified, of course. So doing a, calculation of trying to move the needle, you want to focus on your biggest carbon emitters. So that can mean a variety of things. So whenever we connect with our clients, we like to create a materiality matrix. So that's going to prioritize what's the biggest carbon emitters and then what's really important to them as a company because they have, their values, their mission, they have stakeholders, they might have investors. So we want to tie all of those together to make sure that we're putting our energy in the right priorities in the right order. It can be a little daunting to, say, hey, we're going to decarbonize our company in the next couple years. So we really like to make a tangible roadmap with our clients by prioritizing the carbon emitters of what you can do in the first year, the second year, the fifth, and leading on how you can phase out those carbon emitters over the next years and decades to come. So to move the needle, we really need to prioritize the carbon emitters. And also, it takes a village. So I always feel bad when it's like one person and 1,000-person company that's trying to move the needle. It really does take everyone's input and excitement around it. So there might need to be some, motivation from leadership to let everyone know that this is a priority and why, and how people can have a call to action to make sure that, everyone plays a role and they're contributing together collectively to move the needle and reduce carbon across the company.
That's great. Real quick before we move on to the next subject, did you guys experience that, excuse me, at Vertical Group, where maybe one department was motivated to do something and others weren't? And how did you guys address that? Or was everyone just bought in because of the focus of the business?
Yeah. I think that we have a bit of an advantage by being a sustainability company. So everyone at Vertical Group is all for it. They're focused on decarbonizing the projects that we work on. So it was kind of a no-brainer for us to do that self-reflection for ourselves. However, it can be time consuming. So that was the only bit of pushback that we felt is that, just based on people's capacity and knowledge. There's folks on our team that work on building projects and kind of understand the terminology, but some folks maybe on like an administrative side, needed that uh, knowledge add to really understand and make sure that we were getting the correct data. But everyone was definitely motivated on board, so thankfully we had that going for us.
Well, that's good. Well, that's a good segue into the next subject. How do we decarbonize without blowing budgets and timelines? And those are some real world challenges, struggles, and I think that's where a lot of people's apprehension stems from.
Absolutely. Yes, we get that question all the time. What is the green premium? What's the ROI, return on investment? That all has to make sense as far as your budget. And again, going back to the roadmap, we're not asking for companies to do everything in the first year. We want to build up some momentum, and lay out a roadmap for what's feasible. So as far as meeting, the budget, we don't like to be brought on too late. I'll take example for a lead certification project. Our sweet spot is to get involved at the DD, the design development phase. And then we're able to integrate with the design team and really analyze different um, energy HVAC systems and plumbing systems to make sure that we are integrating sustainability into the design. Whereas if we're brought on too late in the design, it's almost an add-on. And at that point, you're just kind of doing documentation and hoping that the design team designed it sustainable or green. So that's when it gets to be more expensive because then you have to go back and redesign to try to meet your like LEED certification goals. Same thing with ESG and carbon reporting. Um, it's usually done at a 1 year interval. And so if we're brought on, halfway through the year, it's really hard to make those first. We have to have some time to analyze, the previous 6 months and then make recommendations. Then it takes time to really change those policies and educate the company and get buy-in and really make some movement. So at that point, you're almost at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So we really like to get involved as early as possible in the design to make some tangible changes, or get involved, in the previous year or early in the year, so we can make those recommendations for ESG and carbon reporting for a year's worth of data.
Yeah, no, we see that a lot, obviously, on our side of the equation as well, in the climate tech side, where people are challenged to get the data and to get it in a timely fashion. So that is what you were just talking about. But
Mhm.
we have the ability to, save people 60, 70, sometimes 80% time versus the traditional methodology by utilizing. So it almost sounds like you guys are advising the companies to have deeper, more meaningful levels of conversation across multiple departments at the earliest stages possible, and bringing in the consulting, bringing in the legal, bringing in risk mitigation, bringing in the technology, get all the ingredients on the table before you get too far into this project so that you're not going backwards, wasting time, wasting budget in order to make things right. Yeah, good advice. Awesome. So,
Absolutely.
with regard to like certifications and outcomes, are you guys seeing situations where green building labels are driving an impact in one way or another?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of green building certifications and actually following through with the whole process. So something like LEED, Leadership for Energy and Environmental Design. People on the call might recognize there's usually a plaque on the front door of a building that says LEED or well or fit well. So that's how you know it's a LEED building. Definitely, I'm a fan of that because it's been around for at least 30 years and it's a really worldwide known rating system. USGBC runs the LEED and WELL building certification. LEED focuses on a variety of different topics. It's energy, water, materials, location. Uh, Whereas well focuses on the health and wellness of the building. So it goes through a rigorous third-party certification. So not only is my team at Vertical Group looking at it, it also goes through GBCI, Green Building Certification Institute, to make sure that all the design documents and construction verification is verified. So I say that because sometimes projects just want to go for like LEED equivalency, and while it might make sense sometimes, a lot of the times that's when the corners are cut and you're not following through with your true commitments. But I always like to demonstrate an ROI, return on investment, with these LEED and well, green globes, etc. types of green building certifications, because that's where you're really going to convince a lot of people that might not be quite as convinced with sustainability just because it's doing the right thing. So the ROI really needs to make sense, and we can demonstrate that through an energy model. So making a 3D model of the building, inputting the R value and U value of the building envelope, insulation, and glazing, and then running the model based on input that we've received from the client as far as occupancy and hours of operation and types of equipment and go through various iterations too. Like, hey, if the first energy model is showing that it's going to have really high energy use intensity EUI, and it's going to be really expensive during the operations phase, try to swap out some of those pieces of equipment, maybe use some heat pumps or change out the U value of and R value of like insulation and the glazing so that when this project is complete and handed off to the operations team, their energy bills are not skyrocketed. So we're doing that work during the design process and demonstrating that ROI so that it will be maybe they need to spend a bit more money up front to actually go through some of these green building certifications, but it's really going to pay off in the long run because buildings, should be around at least 30 years for a lifetime is the metric I like to use. We're not trying to
Okay.
like construct a building and then tear it down after like 5 years. So at least 30 years is how we like to look at return on investment of buildings.
So you can show them a holistic kind of a crystal ball view of what this investment up front would look like over the course of 30 years. I would
Mhm.
imagine you get a lot of questions from people like, do I really need to do this? Or why is it important? How often does that come up and how do you guys navigate that? How do you have that conversation with them?
All the time. I really like to, when I meet with a team, I'm involved upstream on the proposal and contract side with clients, and then I hand it off to our projects team. And I'm there with our project team the whole time to make sure it goes smoothly. So I'm in touch with a lot of people along the different timelines of projects. So while the client might be really excited about sustainability lead well certification at the beginning, by the time it reaches, through the design team, um, we have our OAC meetings, owner, architect, contractor. By the time we reach, through the design team to the construction team, a little bit of that excitement sometimes gets lost. And we have to, remind them of why we're doing this. It's the owner requirement. But also, I really like to connect with people one on one or understand what they like to do in their daily lives on the weekend. So while I had a superintendent that was just, you know, really not engaged or as excited as everyone else about the lead certification, I started to connect with them and understand what they do, on the weekend. And I found out that they like to go hiking with their kids. And unfortunately, the air quality was super terrible this one summer, and they really weren't able to get out there and go hiking. So their kids were, had to go on the iPad and play games because the air quality was so bad. So once I connected with them on that level and understood of explained how climate change is impacting air quality, I really
Oh,
connected with them on a personal level and I started to get them more engaged and excited about what we were doing around green building certification.
that's a great way to help people see the forest through the trees. So obviously total cost is too expensive, right? That's always going to be the driver. But you had mentioned about how you guys kind of roadmap things. Are there examples or maybe some of the things you guys do where you can talk about like trade-offs between like performance, feasibilities, costs, the initial as well as the 30-year life cycle? How would you guys incorporate that into the conversation to help maybe draw people into a more open, meaningful conversation rather than them just assuming it's just way too expensive and then discounting what you have to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I can think of one example. There's a project in Los Angeles. It's a campus for education, and they wanted to bring us in. And this is actually a really beautiful story because it was not the administration of the school or the principal that was originally asking for decarbonization. It was the students. The students
Oh,
started asking the question, hey, I'm seeing all these commitments around decarbonization. What are we doing at our school? So it was the
nice.
students asking for it, which was really heartwarming. And we brought the students in, kind of under our wing and mentored them along the way and had them sit in on meetings to see what we were doing just so that they could have this engagement and level of knowledge for them to have and take with them as they graduated and went on to other schools. So what we did there is we did an energy audit where we visited the campus, and started to take a look at their inventory of different building systems around MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and then obtain any policies that they have around like building maintenance, just so that we can make recommendations to try to um, enhance the lifetime of the building and the MEP systems. So that roadmap included, year one, let's try to make some policy changes, and then take an inventory of, what is the remaining lifetime of your different pieces of mechanical equipment. There were a few pieces of mechanical equipment that are like run on gas, like a gas boiler. So we said, no need to like rip that out day one and replace it because you guys just bought it 2 years ago. So typically those types of systems can last 10 to 15 years. We started to roadmap, at what year should you start to replace that equipment when it's reaching the end of lifetime, so that you're not only avoiding like additional maintenance costs, you're reducing the embodied carbon. And embodied carbon is all the energy and carbon that goes into manufacturing a piece of equipment. So we wouldn't recommend like ripping out a new piece of equipment just because it's gas and replacing it with electric. Let's start to come up with a phase out plan so that it's at least tangible and you're not doing everything day one. You have that roadmap of like 10 to 15 years, to create a decarbonization plan, that's feasible. It makes an
Yeah.
impact, moving the needle.
That moves the needle. Like getting started, just get started today. Start doing something today, this year, and then, like you said, have that long-term roadmap for success. That way, you're just continually in motion, doing something each year to slowly get better. So I had a question, and it was also there's a question in from the audience. And what certifications do you recommend? Like, are there some that are better than others? Maybe they're easier to achieve, or they have a more meaningful impact. What does that conversation look like?
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of different options with certifications. So we like to start out with a feasibility assessment and determine, maybe pick three different options, narrow it down, put together a scorecard, where are you currently at as a company, or where is your building currently at and at what level? And what are some things that we can do to improve and bump you to the next level? So as far as certifications for buildings, whether it's in design, construction, or operations, again, LEED certification, well, Fitwell is similar to Well, it just uses a little bit different approach. Green Globes. Um, so those are good for buildings. And then as far as like ESG, I think that going through the science-based targets is a really popular one. CDP, Carbon Disclosure Project, is really great. A lot of large tech companies are requiring companies to go through the CDP process to
Mhm.
set them up for success to work more with these tech companies. So it's a good idea to go through CDP, if your company wants to work with these large tech companies. So those are a few of the certifications that we're seeing in the marketplace and continues to be relevant.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought up CDP because I think it's a really great organization, right? Because it doesn't matter what your initial score is. You're not punished. Like even if you get a horrible F, it doesn't matter. Like you're not going to be ostracized. It just gives you a visual of where you are today, and then you can start to roadmap success. So again, you're becoming action oriented instead of just planning for 2050, which is so far from now. And you can start making improvements, and then you could really kind of get the organization to get excited and rally around, hey, here's where we are. And if we just do these simple things this year, we're going to be here next year. and then you get some momentum. Going back to the certifications, things like that, I apologize, I'm not an expert in the space. I know enough to be dangerous. Are there any like certifications that you guys recommend like in the initial development design phase, and then you would recommend others later on once the building's up and operational and moving, or do you try to get them all planned out, from day one?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Um, I always usually start with lead just because there's so much variety. They have it available for different project types, whether it's new construction or renovation, it's a housing project. So there's a lot of different variety for lead. And I also like lead because there's the building design and construction. So we recommend that from the beginning if the project is about to start design or in the middle of design. So BD&C, building design and construction. There's the ID&C, interior design and construction. So if it's not a new build or major renovation, definitely would like to recommend ID&C. And then if the project is already constructed and uh, occupied, then you would go with the operations and maintenance, the lead
Mm.
O&M pathway. But yeah, green globes fit well. Well, that all can happen during the design phase or the operational phase as well. And to add on to the different types of certifications, so I spoke about like building certifications and then pathways for carbon reporting. And I wanted to add on for your own company, a certification that you can obtain is B Corporation. So you could probably go in your freezer if you have Ben and Jerry's and look on there, and it's a B Corp. There's lots of B Corps. It doesn't matter what type of industry you're in. It's a third party, rigorous certification where you self reflect and see, how well your company is performing in regards to decarbonization, social equity, how well the employees are supported and treated. So B Corporation is another one and the Just label also by the International Living Future Institute. It kind of looks like a nutrition label, and it also focuses on different categories like sustainability and carbon reporting and social equity and health and wellness. So those are great reflections for your company that you can get those certifications and wear it proud.
Awesome. So you just mentioned, a couple handfuls of different certifications. Sounds like a lot. Also sounds expensive. Um, are there like just continual costs with each of these certification levels? And then are there ways to help bring down those costs? And then also with certifications, how do you like help organizations see them as useful tools rather than just like a box to check or some sort of goal that they might not even be aiming towards?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there can be those upfront costs with going for these certifications. So the building design and construction or interior design and construction, focusing on those words, design and construction. So the costs do end when construction is complete. So that's great. Your
Okay.
certification is closed. You're not required to, report after that. However, there is the option if you choose to, you can go for operations and maintenance and continue to report. So with operations and maintenance, you need a report every 3 to 5 years. But if you have it set up for success, where you have your data being collected for energy and water, you can definitely automate that. That will make the lift and time investment much lower. So then it's just small fees just to keep that up every 3 to 5 years. Um,
Mhm.
Same with the company certifications. You can just do it one time and then, it's optional to keep updating it. But you do need to be clear of when that certification was obtained, what year. And then just be sure to look into if there are any lapse or requirements that are needed because you wouldn't want to have to go through the whole process again if there is a 3 to 5 year requirement because then you'd have to start from scratch. So again, going back to the ROI, we really like to demonstrate the return on investment, whether that's reducing your energy costs or there's a lot of studies around people be more productive and happier employees if they work in a work, live, and play in a LEED certified building, or if they work for a B corporation, the employee retention is much higher. So employees are much more likely to stay at these types of companies and be more productive. So there's science and metrics around that.
Very useful, helpful to have. Yeah, you mentioned that, water, energy. We see that a lot on our side again with, the IoT integration across water, energy to help companies, help buildings, help, organizations to be able to track that, capture that, integrate it into a process where they get better results and outcomes, which just allows them then to manage it, make decisions, decarbonization strategies. Um, just putting a final bow on the certifications. It kind of sounds like, yes, it's initial, but if you plan it right, then once you're in, and then you guys are giving them this long-term goal strategy, as long as they're just maintaining within the confines or the parameters of those certifications, then they're gonna they should be able to maintain that high level of efficiency. And going back to your example of the boiler, you don't just swap it out just because of there's embedded carbons, but then if you prepare for it and had a roadmap, now you know, hey, at this time, this is when it starts to become less efficient. This is when you would swap that out. So I would imagine you already have a lead certification and there's steps to kind of follow, at different increments or anniversaries down the road where you would make an adjustment or have something tested. So that's all part of the planning. Then that would ultimately help them become way more efficient throughout the life cycle of that building. And that's where that long-term ROI comes in. Perfect.
Yep. Nice
So with
bow.
operational carbon, right now we're in the building, right? We did the design development. Now we're in it, we're operating. Um, you know, Operational carbon, it's a blind spot, yes? So design alone, not enough, obviously. So then what are some of the things you guys are recommending, to help with that? Sorry
To
if my
help with
question
the
wasn't right. I can reword it.
yeah, focusing on the operations of the building or scope
Yeah,
1, 2, 3. Yeah.
yeah. I think that
Yeah.
part, yeah. The,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. I can
So
expand on
digging
that.
into, yeah, the now that we're functional, the building's moving, how do people get in and start tracking their carbon footprint and working on, decarbonization strategies? How do they make improvements, while they're actually, utilizing the space that you guys help them design and develop?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think a nice like handoff from the construction to the operations team is the commissioning process. So our commissioning agents will be there, all part of the planning, right? So they'll be there throughout construction, but definitely towards the end of construction to make sure that the MEP equipment is installed and functioning properly per the OPR, owner project requirements, and BOD, basis of design. And then performing a level of enhanced commissioning. So that's when our commissioning agents touch base, about 10 months post occupancy, once the occupants move in, just to check in. It's a different season, right? After 10 months.
Mhm.
So make sure that the MEP equipment is functioning properly and help fine tune any adjustments. And then you're also, that 10 months is a sweet spot because you're catching the before the end of the warranty period. So before that 12-month warranty period ends, you're able to touch base, reach out to the manufacturers, the installers, and make any adjustments before that warranty period completes. So making sure that there are the O&M operations and maintenance manuals available and trained for the facility operators is really crucial. So that just summarizing what that handoff process looks like from construction to the operations phase. And from there, ideally, hopefully, there is a BMS building monitoring system that the facilities operators can, check, hopefully in real time, to see if there is like a spike in energy or spike in water, because that usually signifies a water leak or there needs to be some maintenance done on the pieces of equipment. The reason I suggest that is because with your utility provider, usually you're only getting your monthly utility bills at the end of the month. So you don't want to wait an entire month to know if there's an issue. So if you have a building
Mm,
monitoring system, have meters that are recording at 1 hour intervals or daily intervals, then you can have that real time insight if there does need to be anything changed to monitor the performance of the building. So I'll just pause there.
gotcha.
That's what I would recommend for the building operations, and happy to to dive into like scope 1, 2, 3 emissions at any point. But yeah, that's what our team likes to help out with for the operations of the building.
Awesome. So there is a question that came in from someone with a construction firm, and they were saying, is there anything for they can integrate sustainability from the beginning, and is it worth the investment? And then I think that ties into this building monitoring system, and then because there's another question which ties into what you just talked about was the scope 1, 2, and 3, where they're asking you about the data collection. That's just their biggest challenge, and what are ways for them to streamline in this problem and make it more efficient.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Great question from the construction side. And there's different, types of projects, whether it's design, bid, build, or design, build. So that will determine at what point the general contractor is included into the team. So if the earlier the better, of course, because then the construction team can advise if those sustainable materials that the design team has specified are even available. Sometimes they're not available, or there's a cost premium or a lag in availability time, procurement time. So as soon as possible, if you could get involved and get in touch with the design team and verify what they have designed is actually truly attainable, then that would be ideal. You know, Diving into the construction phase, some things that you can do is make sure that there's an erosion sedimentation control plan. Usually the civil engineer will create that, but you can also just take a site map and identify where your sandbags are going to be, the rumble plates, any soil erosion mitigators to make sure that you're not polluting outside of your project boundary. Construction demolition waste management plan is a big one that you can have a lot of influence on. So I like to set the target, and this refers back to LEED. The target is at least 75% diversion rate from the landfill. And so the way that you achieve that is to first, have conversations with your local waste haulers, uh, get input from them of what is a good goal to set and see if that service is available. Maybe they can send you a sample waste ticket from a recent project that they worked on and start to have those conversations so that, again, it's not a surprise when you get the first waste ticket and it's below that target that you had in mind. So having those conversations earlier. If you have space on the construction site and you can swap out dumpsters at different phases depending on what is your most waste occurring at that time, source separating is going to increase your chances for uh, waste diversion. So having a separate bin for concrete, a separate bin for drywall, separate bin for wood, those if those materials are separated, there's less chance of contamination.
mhm.
And they'll already be separated, so you can divert that or reuse it on site, or the recycling facility can use it. So those are some of the things that I would recommend, as well as if we're talking about carbon, the heavy emitters of carbon is going to be your concrete and your steel. So trying to get uh, procure concrete and steel with high recycled content. So you're probably gonna have a conversation with the structural engineer, see what they specified, and talk to your local suppliers to see what's available. So definitely worth the investment, because you're going to not only reach the project goals, and then you're also gonna divert waste away from the landfill, and there's a cost savings there, right? If you're sending something to the recycling facility, typically going to cost less than having to pay that dump fee at a landfill.
Mhm. Yeah. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it kind of sounds like it does behoove any construction company to invest in their own sustainability practices for a multitude of reasons. One, they can help drive down some costs on site, like you just mentioned, right? With diverting materials, becoming more efficient. They'll be able to track their own footprint and they'll be able to demonstrate that probably would allow them to win more projects. If someone wants to
Yeah.
invest in an environmentally friendly building, they're going to probably want to partner with environmentally conscious, suppliers and vendors and construction companies, things like that. So that's a double win for them. And then I think moving forward, if more the entire build space it just adopts some of these logical things and just make them standard practice, then that right there would make it more repeatable, and therefore the cost of it would start to go down. It won't be like a specialized one-off situation. It'll just be an industry standard. So that's a triple win for the construction company. Oh, excellent. Yep, makes sense. And so hopefully that answers your question. There are ways to do that. And again, just like with the building itself, it doesn't need to be a massive spend in order to be environmentally conscious and have a decarbonization strategy and a plan and the ability to have the data available, right? Everyone's involved in that, right? With your scope one, two, and three. Someone somewhere plays a part in all of those calculations. And so we need the buildings to be able to calculate. We need all their suppliers and the construction companies to be able to calculate. That way, everyone can see where the footprint is and then incorporate some of the strategies you guys talk about as consultants to help them to lower that footprint. Beautiful. So
Mhm.
I think that leads, how do then we turn sustainability projects, ideas, goals into board-ready decisions? That's a tough one, right? I know it always goes back to the ROI, but maybe there's some examples, or maybe there's some anecdotes, or maybe there's even some new, policy or something that's out there that's actually useful and helpful in these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And I saw a question in chat like, how do I convince my company just to get started?
I
So
saw
happy
that
to
one
kind of
too.
tie that in.
Yeah, please.
Come Yeah, yeah. And me, prior to Vertical Group, working at different companies where sustainability wasn't their top priority, I ran into this a lot. So I created the internal green team to get more than just one person trying to move the needle. So trying to get as many people like on your team internally as possible will help, you know, distribute the workload and help you make movement. So I'd say just to get started so that you are prepared to eventually get to those board decisions and in the round table is to refer to some of the frameworks and just start to like ask yourself like, yes, is my company already doing this? No, is this an area to improve? We're happy to help at Vertical Group. So let me know, find me on LinkedIn or send me an email. Happy to continue the conversation. But if you just want to get started and download the framework from the EPA or science-based targets or the UN Sustainable Development Goals is a really great place to start and start to make that checklist of like, yes, are we already doing this? Maybe we could start doing it, or like, no, this seems like a really big reach goal and we would need a lot more resources. So that's going to set you up for success with, actually convincing leadership to make movement on this. And the earlier you get started, getting that data, having those reflections will set you up for success. So regulation is increasing across locations. I know here in California, we have the Senate Bill 253 and 261, where companies $1 billion or more in revenue have to report their scope one and two and soon to be scope three carbon emissions. So
Mhm.
there is the regulation pushing in California, and we're starting to see that come up in different states in the United States and the EU and globally. It's starting to become a regulation. So it's better
Yeah.
just to kind of get ahead of that so it's not a
Yeah.
surprise later. So yeah, having those
No,
conversations in the boardroom
yeah,
is
no, that's
important
a
too.
perfect anecdote, right? Because going back to the design of a building, the sooner you guys get in, you can actually help control those costs. On this one, talking about tracking your carbon emissions, the sooner you just start doing it, actually the more beneficial it will be. Get ahead of it. Don't wait till the end. Don't risk getting shut down or a fine. Don't risk losing a contract because you couldn't comply with the need. Just be prepared and just get started. That's that, moving the needle means just start actioning some of these things, day one, year one, and then make improvements along the way. That's good advice for sure. There's a question. This one's interesting. So let's see. In a franchise-heavy portfolio where asset ownership is decoupled from brand control, how can organizations initiate and scale building energy audits across distributed assets?
Very good question. Yeah, we work with all different types of companies, whether it's privately owned or publicly traded or different franchises. So the brand and consistency might be a bit of variety. But hopefully there is at least one like point of contact that does have an oversight of that portfolio. So I would definitely want to get in touch with that person and then, have at least one representative from each of the different, representatives of those locations, and start with a charrette. So just getting the leadership and key stakeholders in one room, and again, doing that materiality matrix, what's important to each of these different individuals and what's the tying priority. So just really hearing from everyone where they're coming from, what the priority is.
Mhm.
So creating that consistency and then having a energy audit across distributed assets. Definitely, it depending on how many locations there are, it might be a challenge to go visit each and every single site. So, depending where they are, I really like to look at what climate zone they're in. So maybe we visit like one location in each of the different climate zones, and then we can take some lessons learned for each of those different climate zones. And then if there's any information about how those different locations are constructed, whether it's a concrete tilt-up, warehouse, or maybe it's like made out of CMU, or, just getting like the building type, maybe it's wood framed versus steel framed. So trying to have some information about what climate zone it's in, the type of construction, the level of stories, some sort of information so that we're not having to visit every single location, and then make recommendations. So I would make those recommendations, distribute it. Each of the locations could make those adjustments, and then we'll get feedback. And then from there we can target next steps. But a lot of data goes into that. So I do want to note that that is a heavy administrative lift if you have a ton of data. So there are different frameworks and platforms and softwares out there to help take that heavy
Yes.
effort around data and like make
Yeah.
projections. So Colin,
And
if you
yes,
want to maybe
please
chime in
incorporate
about that.
yeah, please incorporate a actual functional platform to help with the data collection, data organization, making it actionable, auditable. Otherwise, you're just gonna fall behind and get overwhelmed. We are actually past time, and so, but we are going to continue to answer a couple more questions before we close this out. We'll send off the recording. I do want to thank you for joining us from wherever you were, and obviously special thanks to Rebecca for her time, all of the insight, wisdom, and I'm really looking forward to our next conversation because there's so many different things that we could dive into and go a little deeper. So hopefully we could do this again, have a couple more conversations, talk about some maybe different success stories that you guys have experienced. But again, thank you for your time. This is awesome. We're gonna answer a couple more questions before we close it out, and then we'll send off the link to the video. So again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one. Okay, so for those people that needed to bounce and go back to work, I know you have a couple more minutes, so let's see. Did you see another question that jumped out at you, or should I just fire away? Let's see. How can you, how can one ensure reduced embodied emissions during the design and development phase versus a renovation phase? I think you started to
Mm.
touch on that.
Yeah,
earlier.
definitely. So, embodied emissions, and just a reminder for folks that are not familiar, embodied carbon, that's all the energy and carbon it takes to upstream, like manufacture a product and then transport it to the site. So, it's a little bit out of sight, out of mind, but before that product actually reaches the construction site or reaches the building as a delivery, it's all that happens before. So during the design and development phase, I would recommend the going back to the concrete and the steel. So trying to have high recycled content for the steel and then using different concrete mixes. Maybe there's some fly ash available that could be part of the concrete mix and trying to source that locally because again, embodied carbon incorporates the transportation carbon that is required. So if you're getting it locally sourced, you don't have to pay that shipping across seas or shipping from a truck to transport it to the site. And if you're using recycled material, you're not having to manufacture new material and mine it from the earth. It's already been, extracted from the earth or grown if it's a tree for wood. You're able to recycle that material. So for the renovation phase, I will say that the most sustainable building is the building that's already built. So
Mm.
you know, no need to tear down a building if it's still structurally sound or could be improved. Because so much of that embodied carbon, that concrete, that steel has already been invested into this building footprint. So if you could renovate a building rather than demolish it and start from scratch, that would be ideal. So for
Gotcha.
renovation, you're probably going to focus more on like the finish materials. So the carpet, the ceiling, the walls. So if that, there's something called a take back program that hopefully more manufacturers are including. So if you order carpet and of course, it's not going to be cut precisely to size. So there's going to be some extra material for the carpet. What these manufacturers that have a take back program do is they take back the extra material and they're able to reuse it or recycle it properly in their own facility. So that's something that you can do for the design and development phase, prioritize concrete and steel with low embodied carbon. And then during renovation, try to reuse what's there or sign up manufacturers that have that take back program.
Wonderful. There's one about an energy audit. So once an audit's complete, what are a few next steps to meet emission targets? Any practical operational changes that can regulate water and energy systems? Good question.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we after doing an energy audit, we kind of like just summarize what we observed and then make recommendations of where the effort could be put to phase out those systems. If it's reaching the end of its lifetime, maybe include a heat pump next time or electrify your boiler. So those recommendations are included for next steps. And then we always recommend including meters. So sub meters, if there's multiple tenants within the space, sub metering those different floors for the different tenants, sub metering your domestic hot water, your boiler, the irrigation, sometimes even like individual plumbing fixtures or water sources so that you have those meters and tie it into the BMS. So that would be my recommendation as far as like systems and how to monitor it forward. Um, for energy, solar heat gain can be quite a challenge for some buildings that have a lot of glass and glazing, because when that solar heat gain, once the sun hits the glass, it's heating the interior of the space. And then you're going to have to use more energy to cool down the space. So you're running your HVAC system more often. So there's certain things that you can do if you have a lot of glass and glazing, whether it's adding some shading so that those peak times during the day you're not having that heat, or maybe there's like a film that could be added to the glass and glazing. So those are the types of things that we would recommend after doing an energy audit.
Awesome. Yeah. And then obviously utilizing, a platform like a Breathe where there are ways where you can track your utility spend. And, like you had said earlier, don't wait till the end of a cycle or a pay period, have it monitored often, have it action right there in a control tower, and then you can make adjustments. That's part of the decarbonization strategy as well. How do you optimize the efficiency of a building? If you notice like one floor is 40% empty for 8 hours of the day, you don't have to, you can move some people and you don't even have to heat or cool that thing at the same level that needs to be comfortable for people. That could be a massive savings over the course of a year, things like that. So
Mhm.
that makes perfect sense. So what I'm hearing definitely is, regardless of whether it's a new build design or you know, upgrading, retrofitting an existing building, the most important thing is to have these meaningful conversations. That's step one. Get the right people involved. Have that conversation. That's the old adage of, with carpentry, right? You measure twice and then cut once. Have this conversation, get people aligned, figure out what the long-term goal strategy is, and then what are the best practical steps to take right now. Step one, step two, blah, 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 blah. That way it'll allow the whole project to be efficient and optimal. Correct?
Absolutely. That's so funny. Measure twice, cut once. I did a presentation at our annual Net Zero conference in Los Angeles. It's going to be October 8th this year. My presentation was titled Measure Twice, Cut Once per Year. So that was like measure
Beautiful.
twice of your annual carbon emissions, and then every year be sure to cut it as you go moving forward.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we got through everything. Thank you so much again for your time. This was wonderful. I learned a lot, and because I'm not an expert in the build space, so thank you for everything. And I really, truly looking forward to the next conversation. I just have a few questions that popped up, so we'll talk offline. I think we can come up with another topic or two, and really just turn you loose with a little bit more granular detail about some specific challenges or things you guys are seeing. I think one thing that just popped out, and maybe we can discuss it, was I wonder if there's a situation where you have a client where you guys help them to fix a mess, an ongoing mess, and what that total output was or cost was. And then there was a fast forward where you actually worked with the same client from day one and put together a way more efficient, and then they can contrast and compare those two experiences. And that could be like a success story that they could share.
I have a few of those. Yes.
Beautiful.
Thanks for
Well,
having
thank
me.
you for your
Happy to
time, and
continue.
thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Bye bye, everybody.
Sounds
Thank you.
great. Have a great day. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Bye.